I am going to EVO this year very, very soon. I went for the first time last year and it was a magical, very expensive experience. I love fighting games to death and they have been soaring recently. I mean seriously, right now the genre is the biggest and most popular it has ever been. Just a little over 2 years ago, we were in the golden age of fighting games when Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, and Tekken all had new entries come out within several months of one another. And that's just the big boys. Other stuff this decade includes Guilty Gear Strive, KOF 15, Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, Rivals of Aether, Fatal Fury, Sifu. Wait, how the hell did that get in there? And a bunch of other stuff. On top of that, we've gotten collections, remasters, numerous titles getting retrofitted rollback. Everywhere you look, there's an abundance of cool stuff for people to discover and play. And there's a lot more on the horizon. 2XKO soft launches very soon, Invincible Versus looks awesome, Marvel Tokon is the biggest one everyone's excited for. Virtua Fighter 6 is finally a reality after like 2 decades of Virtua Fighter 5. I imagine NRS's next game won't be too long from now, and Capcom may or may not be working on a crossover title, either CBS 3 or MVC 4, take your pick. Alongside the wealth of titles, there's also been pretty significant advancements over time that have now become the standard. Rollback netcode is something that was seen as a luxury for so long that it took a global pandemic for publishers to take netplay more seriously. It helped open the door for online tournaments, which is a great way to increase exposure in lesser known regions and scenes. Other stuff like emphasis on tutorials, replay takeover, and precise frame data are also slowly becoming the standard. Tools to help players get better and stay invested. A good chunk of publishers have invested more into their games and communities with big year-long tournaments with regional qualifiers and big prize pools. As an outsider who greatly appreciates and loves everything fighting games, it's ridiculous to see how much growth there has been for the genre and its communities. Is everything perfect? No. But for it to reach this level at all is insane, and it feels like it will only get bigger. There's a lot to be excited about, there's a lot to appreciate, and a lot to work towards. That's a lot of praise and reverence coming from me, and you're probably asking, well, what's the big deal? What's the point of the video's title? It's been something I have felt and thought a lot about for a pretty decent amount of time now, and I wanted to open this to discussion because I am genuinely interested to hear what people think. There's a handful amount of facets to my train of thought behind this topic, so I will start with franchises. I was born in '97. I became sentient around 4 or 5, and the first game I remember playing was Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Thanks to a Chinese takeout place that my family went to religiously that was decked out with cycling arcade cabinets of fighting games, that place was my first introduction to many fighting game series. Tekken, Street Fighter, King of Fighters, Mortal Kombat, DOA, Soul Calibur, Bloody Roar, you name it. As time passed, I saw new entries for games I had played as a kid, and I was so excited to get my hands on the new entries. This happened to me as a teenager, this happened to me as a young adult, and this happened to me as an adult. This cycle has happened numerous times over to the point where in the AAA fighting game space, it's very hard for me to recall the last new fighting game IP, and I do mean a truly new IP. The only ones I can think of are BlazBlue back in 2008 and ARMS almost a decade ago. And yes, ARMS is a fighting game, I don't want to hear it. For the longest time, I have been seeing nothing but sequels in this space. Nearly every original major fighting game franchise is either 30 plus or pushing 30. That's not inherently a bad thing, okay? I can appreciate when a series lasts that long. It's pretty impressive, honestly. I understand why they have lasted so long. Fighting games are still a bit of a niche genre, and in an industry that has progressively gotten so scared of losing money on games that they make, it's much safer to make a new entry of a known IP where you have an established audience rather than starting from nothing. But in the 90s, there were a metric ton of fighting game series that got established. World Heroes, Darkstalkers, Saturday Night Slam Masters, Kizuna Encounter, Eternal Champions, and so much more. There's so many, including Guilty Gear. And I bring up Guilty Gear because in that ArcSys Direct that seemingly everyone hated, Daisuke Ishiwatari, the creator of Guilty Gear, said some very interesting truths about game development as a whole.
In recent years, with AAA blockbusters and excellent indie titles gaining popularity, it has become extremely risky for companies to create new series. This has led to dwindling opportunities for young creators to have their own projects. Our flagship title, Guilty Gear, has now become a million-selling copy work. But its very first installment was a small-scale project. From there, over many long years, we built a foundation that could guarantee a certain level of quality in the fighting games genre.
Back then, they weren't hyper-fixated on profit margins and player engagement. They were mostly just making shit for the fun of it. And if you weren't taking the initiative to make new things, how would anything ever grow? Everything was new once. Did everything grow into a big thing? No, but that shouldn't deter you from trying. As time passes and the legacies of these series go on, the possibility of getting anything truly new dwindles more and more. The quote-unquote new things that we do get come in the form of either crossovers, revivals, or licensed IPs. Do games like Dragon Ball FighterZ and 2XKO and DNF Duel and Invincible Versus and Marvel Tokon count as new? Yes, absolutely, don't get me wrong, but they're cheating, bro, they're cheating! They already have the quintessential element of any fighting game, which are characters. Characters are everything to a fighting game. They are more often than not the first thing people look at before any of the presentation or visuals or any of the actual fighting itself. In some cases that I have experienced firsthand, people will be interested in a game that they most likely won't like just to play as a character that interests them. They are the marketing for a fighting game, more so than anything else. And if you don't have characters, interest greatly wanes. They make or break fighting games for people. Best example of this is MVCI not having any X-Men. I think that game is amazing to play, but a lot of fans of the series weren't interested because there were no mutants. That alone was a huge turnoff. I didn't even mention the visuals and the presentation. Characters mean a lot, and the reality is that you'll never make a roster that makes everyone happy. Luckily, if a character you wanted in a new entry of a fighting game isn't on the base roster, there's always a chance they could be added as DLC. And it's a great thing overall. You get a new game, and a character who hasn't appeared in quite some time finally gets their opportunity to shine in ways that they weren't able to in their last appearance. But I feel like there's a bottleneck as to what would be tolerated over time. The older a franchise is and the more characters they have in their pocket, the more likely it will become that characters will be DLC more than once. And we have already seen this happen a couple of times. In Street Fighter 6, there are 4 characters who are DLC in Street Fighter 5. In Tekken 8, there are 3 characters who are DLC in Tekken 7. Rain was DLC twice in the NRS era before he was a base roster character in MK1. To be fair, these characters often get new models, new moves, have to be adjusted to work in a new combat engine, and it takes money to make DLC characters of extremely high fidelity, which I completely understand. But I wonder for most people where their threshold of tolerance lies. I imagine there's only so many times people will buy Akuma and Armor King as DLC for new Street Fighters and Tekkens. And if these two end up being on a base roster for their next entries, others will take their place in the DLC Phantom Zone. It's almost like a never-ending cycle. And because of this focus on characters, it's almost impossible for any series to take big risks with their rosters or stories because preservation of character availability takes priority. There's a reason no characters stay dead in fighting games unless they're Guilty Gear or Fatal Fury. Heihachi came back from the dead. Mortal Kombat has rebooted itself twice in the last 2 decades because they kill characters so often. M. Bison came back. Even SNK ended up resurrecting most of their characters in KOF 14. And boy was it worth it. Shermie got 1 million views on her trailer. You guys need help. And I don't blame these franchises at all. It sucks for people who are into fighting game lore, but like, what can you do? And that's just returning characters. Every major franchise is doing guest characters now, including Guilty Gear, which I never thought would happen, but guests are part of fighting game DNA now. I know some feel very strongly about them existing, but they work. They work so well, in fact, that there are multiple instances of a single character being a guest in different franchises. This kind of circles back to my previous point about buying a character over and over again. How many times are you going to be okay with buying Terry or 2B or Chun-Li in different games? Would it be more than buying Akuma in every future Street Fighter game? I'm genuinely curious. And the last thing I want to talk about is the emphasis on tradition when it comes to gameplay, something that is more enforced by players than developers. I know it's common practice for a new entry of anything to come out and people end up shitting on it saying that the old one was better. A lot of these games though do try new things in spite of that sentiment. They iterate a lot and almost consistently try new things when it comes to mechanics and characters, but often in a restricted framework. According to most sentiments that I have been witness to, there is a limit to how much a franchise is quote-unquote allowed to do with their formula. I think Rip puts it perfectly.
Most fighting games nowadays, you don't have the opportunity to create something completely new, right? Most of these fighting games that exist, they're very high in the iterative number of whatever their series is. And if you deviate from that too much, the fan base kind of revolts against you. They're like, dude, that's not my same game that I'm growing up liking.
And he's right. It's a huge challenge for these franchises to evolve in ways that are both forward-thinking and respectful of prior expectations based on what people think they're supposed to be, because they can't do any of that with a new IP. For example, Guilty Gear Strive streamlined a lot of its characters and systems. It's the best-selling Guilty Gear ever, but that shift from prior games left a bit of a sour taste in a decent amount of fans' mouths, and they proclaim it's not real Guilty Gear. Anything I see about Street Fighter 6, it's about Drive Rush. It's not real Street Fighter. Tekken 8 with its heat system, it's not real Tekken. Mortal Kombat prides itself on each game being vastly different from one another, and so many people dunk on it for the fact that it doesn't have legacy compared to the other franchises. For MK1 in particular, the cameo system in that game got so much flack. Droves of people begging for a 1v1 mode, even though the game can't work without cameos. I think cameos are super cool, but I guarantee you they will never do anything like this ever again. No opportunity to improve or refine, just gone forever to make more money. I am not saying you have to like something you don't enjoy because it's different. Everyone has their preferences, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's plenty of entries and franchises where the gameplay doesn't click for me, but I do feel like there's not enough appreciation for when teams do try to do new things. If something doesn't work out, then just to go back to what people already like. Makes sense business-wise, but creatively, it's pretty stifling. A lot of developers get tired of making the same things over and over again. That's where licensed fighters kind of have an advantage. That's kind of the reason I am super amped about these 3 upcoming games. What they'll have to offer as their own experience is not tethered to rules or legacy. They can just do their own thing. And that is something I hope we can get with a non-licensed AAA fighting game IP in the future. But with the nature of the genre compounded by the fact that anything nowadays that isn't an instant hit is just forgotten and deemed unworthy of financial or creative investment, leading to studios shutting down, I don't think it will ever change. I know that a lot of my points here could be said about the AAA industry as a whole, but at least in those spheres, they still continue to try new stuff and introduce new IPs, whereas in our little bubble, it rarely happens. Unless that new stuff has a big pre-existing name behind it, it's not happening. Better to revive a dormant series or buy out a license and birth something new because that's the overwhelming demand by audiences. I've seen more pleas for an ArcSys One Piece fighter, a DC vs. Capcom, Tekken and Soul Calibur collections, numerous revival requests for DOA, Darkstalkers, Bloody Roar, you name it. With this much demand and this much potential for returns, why would you ever invest in anything original? You don't have to. And to be fair, like, if they revealed this year that Soul Calibur is coming back as Soul Calibur 7 and that Millennia is the featured guest character, am I gonna be like, man, I wish these publishers would stop cashing in on nostalgia and take risks with something? No, bitch, I'd be screaming my fucking head off. The same way I did for the MVC collection, Marvel Tokon, Smash Ultimate, and practically every other big name franchise that got a new game. With that being said, I wonder if that's more than enough for people. If this cycle is satisfactory, is this the routine that everyone wants? Is this the foundation that's strong enough to sustain itself? Are we stuck, or are we in paradise? A stable release and support cadence of iconic franchises mixed in with the occasional licensed fighters and revivals. Happy with seeing these same characters over and over again for decades and beyond. And if you really think about it, I mean, it's been working for comics for almost 100 years now. If you ask me, that's one way to look at it. That is where I will pass the discussion off to you. Admittedly, I think this entire discussion stemmed from me reading too many opinions for my own good, but it is something that truly fascinates me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? What do you constitute as new or original? Let me know down below, like and sub if you enjoyed the video, and thank you so much for watching.